Welcome to the 2012 ACE Refresher webinar. This webinar will fulfill your 2012 requirement to maintain your ACE status. Please note that this information is all valid from the last quarter of 2012. As we all know, certification is very fluid as far as changes go, so please be aware that there may be changes even in a very short amount of time. So to make sure that you're current and up to date with information, always check the ACF website or call ACF National Office for any questions or concerns that you may have. So again, this is the 2012 ACE Refresher webinar in case you missed the live editions that were given in the last quarter of 2012, and this webinar will give you 1.5 CEHs. Good day and welcome to Pastry 101 webinar for ACE. Thank you for your time today and every day that you assist another culinarian to better themselves through certification. We greatly appreciate your efforts to continue to better our food industry. My name is Elena Clement and I will be presenting your webinar today. A little bit about me: I'm a certified executive pastry chef, an approved ACF judge, and currently the vice president of the nation's Capital Chefs Association here in Washington, D.C. This webinar fulfills your 2012 refresher requirement to maintain ACE status. Participating in programs like this demonstrates the importance of continuing education for our craft. Through evaluation of our skills, we can be better mentors for future chefs and pastry chefs to come. As a reminder, in order to maintain your ACE status, you agree to one refresher course per year, and this is it, and to evaluate one certification exam per year. Any further questions regarding your status can be directed to Alina Cataldi-Cooper at the ACF National Headquarters down in Florida. The overview for today's presentation: we're going to talk about recent certification happenings. Where we are today, the Certification Committee has improved the overall standards through accreditation. Quick reminders on certification protocol and standards. The standardization sets the parameters for fair evaluation for the CPC, CWPC, and the CEPC. Each designation has set competencies required in those jobs specific for those levels. As you might have experienced, the Excel spreadsheet score sheets offer objective evaluation and increased accuracy. The new electronic score sheets are straightforward and well organized, great for both savory and sweet chefs. Be sure to take good notes as they continue to support the scores. We will talk more about the full implementation of new electronic score sheets for the CSC and CEPC, and those will go live the 1st of January of 2013. And what's next? We're going to talk about Certified Master Pastry Chef updates. Okay, so let's talk about recent certification happenings. First and foremost, congratulations to our newest Certified Master Chef, Jason Hall. He successfully completed the exam that was held at the CIA in Hyde Park in late summer of 2012. Congratulations, Chef. What an accomplishment. Next, I want to talk about the online practical exam registration. Anyone can go to the Practical Exams for ACF certification page on the national website and click Register Online. The candidate will then see a list of upcoming exams with the location and dates. The candidate can then click on the specific location and all of the necessary information will appear for that particular site. The candidate can then register for their desired level and pay online. This system enables the host site and the national site to be on the same page with paid candidates. Candidates cannot take a practical exam until they have paid the national office the required fee of $50 for members and $100 for non-members. For any and all test administrators, this tool is amazing and you should become very familiar with it. So if you have not been on the website, please, I urge you, go on to the ACF National website in the certification area and look at the online registration information. It is awesome. Next, the new Certified Culinary Educator written exam has been available since the 20th of September of 2012, and this new exam is a direct result of the job analysis that was done for this certification level. The CCE, the Certified Culinary Educator, is at the beginning of the process for accreditation. Next, we're going to talk about NCCA, which stands for the National Commission on Certifying Agencies. It is a third-party endorsement that provides credibility and adds value and relevancy to certification. By having each certification level accredited, it ensures that each level's test requirements are aligned with the job analysis. The accreditation process has resulted in many changes in the Practical Exam Candidate Guide. The score sheets have been reformatted to increase objectivity, and the written exams have been updated, and accreditation provides a consistent and objective certification process overall. The CEC and the CSC levels have been accredited thus far, and the CEPC application has been submitted. Where we are today. As you can see, our ACE numbers are continuing to grow and increase. So we have over 400 ACEs. Out of those, only 46 are pastry. The Practical Exam Operation Subcommittee increased ACE trainers by adding 4 pastry ACE trainers, 1 for each region, in 2012. By doing this, we are creating awareness among culinarians and evaluators about pastry opportunities. Please welcome the newest ACE trainers. In the Western region, we have Chef Alicia Boedo. In the Central region, Chef Chris Nicosia. For the Southern region, Chef Todd Kaczynski. And for the Northeast region, myself, Elena Clement. Trainers and lead ACEs are here to assist with questions for both candidates and evaluators. You're encouraged to reach out to those in your region or elsewhere for any clarifications. Everyone's contact information can be found on the ACE training page on the ACF national website. When hosting a practical exam with pastry candidates, it is strongly recommended to have at least one ACE who is pastry. If this is not possible, then this training should better equip you as a savory chef evaluator to fairly evaluate pastry exams by understanding the specifications for each level and what to look for when the candidates are performing their practical exams. With that said, it is understood that at this level, the CEC and CEPC level, that's required to be an ACE, that we should all be comfortable evaluating pastry or savory, even if we specialize in the opposite discipline. If anyone knows of any pastry chefs that are interested in becoming ACE, please encourage them to do all the requirements, all the paperwork, all of the necessary steps to become an ACE. We would love to have more pastry ACE. More on where we are today. As evaluators, we have a lot to be proud of. Our ACE numbers continue to increase, and the pool of knowledge that we have is fantastic. I love meeting new evaluators because they bring a fresh perspective to the kitchen, and I always learn something new. Because of continuing education and good solid policies and procedures, there have only been 2 appeal determinations that were made in 2011. This is a very low number considering the overall number of practical exams administered on a yearly basis. So as you can see, in 2011, the pass-fail rate for each of those levels is pretty incredible. So as for these numbers, you can see that the pass-fail ratio for the mid to executive certification levels are very good and have certainly gotten better over the past few years. Certification tools such as the candidate exam manuals and candidate feedback forms are serving as valuable resources to test candidates. If you've not been on the ACF website and taken a look at what is available, take an hour and delve into the incredible amount of information that is housed for candidates and us as well. We can all learn from what is offered on the site. You can find information under Resources, Forms and Downloads, as well as the certification page. These are some quick reminders on policy and procedure for all approved certification evaluators and the ACE trainers. So evaluator affiliation, make sure that you're paying attention to who is actually taking the test so that there is no conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest. So just to clarify, the ACF defines affiliation as a relationship that consists of a vested interest, an employment direct report, a monetary benefit, or any relationship which could personally benefit the evaluator as a result of the candidate passing the exam. So if you're going to get a bonus because the person passes the exam, then that's a conflict of interest, and you need to remove yourself and find somebody to fill your slot. So make sure that if there's any possible conflict, even if it's perceived, make sure that you're covering yourself and cover the ACF. I mean, you're fulfilling a duty to the ACF to be an evaluator. So make sure if there's any kind of conflict or perceived conflict that you find somebody to replace you and step away from that situation. Evaluators training and credentials. As approved certification evaluator, your ACE, you have placed yourself in a position to fairly evaluate candidates taking the practical exam through certification level. So you yourself are a CEC, CEPC, or higher. You have experience. You've been approved through the application process, and you've completed the required training and your apprenticeships. ACF confirms that evaluators have attained the highest level of trust, professionalism, respect, and ethical confidence from his or her peers. So keep that in mind. People look up to you. People that are coming in, the candidates that are coming in, they automatically have respect for you because you already have gone through that process. So don't take advantage of that, and don't be pompous about it. The appeals procedure, again, there's only been a few appeals in the last couple of years, but the procedures themselves are detailed in the policies and procedures documents, which are available on the ACF website. So if you have a candidate that wants to go through the appeal process, they disagree with how the outcome was at their exam, then encourage them to go to the appeals procedure, go through the appeals procedure, and all that information again can be found on the ACF website. Confidentiality, the nature, format, content, and results of examinations are considered confidential information and shall be treated as such in accordance with policies and procedures. The full confidentiality policy can be found on the ACF website. The confidentiality, it's being brought up because it has been an issue in the recent past, and I just want to encourage everyone to refrain from discussing anything that happens in the kitchen during the evaluation outside of discussing it with the other ACE and when you have the critique with the candidate. Other than that, you should not be talking about, oh, so-and-so took the test and they did horrible, or so-and-so took a test, they did fantastic, but they were weak in this area. That conversation should not be happening. If somebody asks you a question, how did the candidate do? You could just refer them to the candidate, and that covers yourself for any kind of liability. So please really keep that in mind. The privacy of the candidate is super important, and you don't want to open yourself up for any kind of lawsuit. Evaluation and critique. At the completion of the exam, candidates will be given a verbal and a written explanation of their scores and performance, which is used to document the results of the exam. So when you are the ACE, it is strongly encouraged that you are taking really good notes as you go through the exam process. There is now a sheet that will be given to the candidate at the end of the critique. What is recommended is that when the ACE gather to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, that somebody jot down in each of the domains what was good, where do they need improvement, any kind of compliments. But this piece of paper is actually going to be handed to the candidate. So it's called the ACF Practical Exam Evaluation Review. The candidate's information is going to be at the top. And then one of the ACE can jot down for each domain. So domain 1 is safety and sanitation. Jot down some things that you noticed, good or bad or otherwise. But remember, the candidate's going to read it. So be cognizant of what you're writing down. Don't say the guy's a slob, because then when you give it to him, he's going to read it and it says, you're a slob. So, consider how your terminology on the piece of paper is written. So domain 1, safety and sanitation. Domain 2, organizational skills. Domain 3, craftsmanship skills. And domain 4 is the finished product. So again, this is going to reinforce their overall performance of pass or fail. So make sure you are taking good notes, that you jot down some good notes on this piece of paper that is going to be handed to them. So how sweet it is. Again, this year's refresher is really focusing on pastry and the changes in the pastry exams. So we have some Q&A that have come up recently and are actually asked multiple times by different people. So we just want to kind of throw out some of those questions and answers to make good clarification for people. First and foremost, as we go through this PowerPoint webinar presentation, there's some beautiful pictures that were kindly given to us by Alicia Boada and Barry Calabo. So we're very thankful that Chef Alicia shared these photographs and sent them so that we have some nice pretty pictures. Everybody likes pretty pictures. So we want to thank her and Barry Calabo for those. But we do want to point out that as we go through, you'll see photos that are in the slides for the certified working pastry chef and certified executive pastry chef. And because the photos are there, does not mean that those photos are providing good examples for what you are looking for as an evaluator. So I know that specifically there is cakes that are not finished according to the guidelines. So again, I just want to emphasize these pictures were given to us. They look pretty, but they do not represent what we are looking for. Okay, so don't use those as an example. Another question that comes up is, how do you handle test anxiety of a candidate? So you go into to start the evaluation, the exams, and the candidate is a nervous wreck. They're shaking. They can't even focus. What do you do? Usually what's recommended, go talk to the candidate. Hey, good morning, chef. How are you? I see you're a little bit nervous. Just want to remind you that we've all been in your shoes. We've taken these exams or we've competed, so we understand the pressure that you might be under. We want you to just relax, do what you do on a daily basis, enjoy yourself. We're just going to walk around. We may ask you some questions, but please just take a deep breath. Do what you do best. That's why you're here, to show us what you can do. And hopefully that will help to calm the candidate down. Ask them if they have any questions. Ask them if they want to take any notes that might help them to remember, X, Y, and Z should happen at this time. But just try to talk to that candidate, make them feel comfortable that you're not going to just be there hounding them and staring at them constantly. You're just going to be making some notes and walking by and asking questions, but just tell them to relax. They're just cooking. We'll have more Q&A towards the end of the presentation. ACE reference material and administrator tools. Earlier, I was talking about how great the ACF website is for reference material. And this is the page. This is what it's going to look like under Test Administrator menu. So if you haven't been on the website and had a look at what's offered, this is a great place to go. Take a look. Has almost every piece of information that you're going to need. So if you are not familiar with this page, even if you are not the test administrator, this is where you can find most of your answers. So it has the request to schedule the practical exam, so how to be a host. It gives you all that information. You can click on the link for all of the approved evaluators and who is current. So once you have finished this webinar, you will become current for the year 2013. Again, you have agreed as an ACE that you will take one webinar refresher each year and that you will be an evaluator at least one time each year. So this will give you the most up-to-date list of approved current evaluators. So if you're hosting an exam, make sure that you are looking at the list before you start inviting your pals to come be evaluators. Make sure they're current, because if they're not current, then unfortunately everybody that takes the exam for that day, it's not going to count. Okay, so be a good administrator and host and make sure that you're looking at this list. The Practical Exam Reference Guide. This reference guide is available online, but please know, like I mentioned before, that this is fluid. It's ever changing. So anything and everything that will be updated, this is the manual that you want to look at. It is living. It is ever changing. I just want to emphasize that it will always be changing. So if you looked at it a year and a half ago, there are lots of changes. So please make sure that you are checking often. I usually go and check this the day or two before I do an exam to make sure I'm up to date on anything that has changed recently. The candidate practical exam feedback form that we were just talking about, this is where it is housed. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Again, you can just handwrite a couple bullet points for each of those domains, and that is given to the candidate at the end of the exam. At the end of the critique. So once the candidate has done their exam, the ACE have talked about what's good, bad, and ugly. Somebody's going to jot down those notes. You give the verbal critique to the candidate. When you're finished, hey, congratulations. Thank you for coming. Here is your sheet so that you don't forget everything that we just said. The waiver of hold harmless release is there if you want to have people sign that. Your summary score sheet, etc. So this site, this information on the website is it's priceless. So please, I strongly encourage you to be very familiar with it. And that administrator guide, that's the living manual that we should all be living by. So if you have questions, check there first. And then, of course, feel free to call any of your ACE trainers for clarification. Okay, now let's get down to the nuts and bolts of any and all changes that have been made to the pastry exams. So first we're going to talk about the Certified Pastry Culinarian, the CPC. Typical CPC candidate could have a high school diploma and a couple years of experience in the industry, or maybe they have less industry experience, but they have just graduated from a certificate program or apprenticeship or an associate's degree program. And then upon completion of this exam, this candidate should be hireable as an entry-level pastry cook. So this is your first level of certification for pastry. As a reminder, and I'm going to repeat this every time we talk about a different level, all practical exam candidates have 30 minutes to set up their workstation. All right, so make sure that if you are hosting, you are the test administrator, that you have done your schedule so that each candidate has that 30 minutes to set up. For each candidate as well, and I will continue to say this for each level, is that a typed menu is expected of each candidate. It should be clean and professional. It should have a logical layout, and there should be no typographical errors. During this 3-hour exam for the Certified Pastry Culinarian, the candidate should prepare all of the required items, finish each item according to industry standards, and present the final products to the evaluators. The candidate can decide to present items as they are completed, or they can present a buffet before the 3 hours is exhausted. The lead ACE can ask each candidate what their presentation preference is prior to the candidate starting their exam. If a candidate chooses to present as the items are finished, the candidate should give the ACE a 10-minute heads up or warning prior to them presenting those products. Okay, so now let's talk about the Certified Pastry Culinarian. What exactly does that candidate need to exhibit during the practical exam? So you'll notice that there are very specific guidelines now. So they need to prepare a genoise, they need to prepare two kinds of cookies, and the Bavarian cream. And the guidelines are more specific on what is to be prepared, how much of those items are to be prepared, and how to present them. So each item is going to be discussed. Genoise first. Candidate needs to prepare and bake 1 8-inch genoise cake. This does not need to be filled or finished or iced or anything. It's just the preparation of the cake itself, and the score will be based on the final quality of the cake. The cake will be presented on a suitable platter like a cake stand or some sort of suitable tray with 1 portion cut out for tasting. So make sure that the candidate does slice that portion out of the cake prior to presenting it. You, the evaluator, should not be cutting the cake and serving yourself. The candidate needs to follow the directions and provide a piece for you to taste. So when you're looking at the genoise, how does it look? How does it taste? How does it feel? By understanding the method of preparation and how the candidate put that together, are you getting the desired end result? So let's just review the MOP, or the method of preparation, for a genoise real quick. So you're going to take your sugar and your eggs, you're going to heat that over a double boiler until the sugar dissolves. Temperature should be between 110 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Traditionally, pastry chefs like it closer to 110. For myself, I found that 120 fully dissolves the sugar and you get better aeration. But ultimately, the eggs and the sugar should be heated. It helps to give more volume. Once the eggs and sugar are heated, the candidate will whip the eggs to full volume, remove it from the mixer. The flour is sifted and folded in by hand. And then the last thing that is going to be put into that cake batter is some warm butter or warm milk or a combination. And then the cake is poured into a prepared cake pan. Again, it's 8 inches. It's optimal if the cake pan is lined with parchment on the bottom, and the candidate does not need to grease the pan so that the cake, because it's a sponge cake, there's no chemical leavener, so the cake can kind of grow up the side of the cake pan. So no pan grease. Parchment paper on the bottom, pour the cake batter in, put it in the oven right away. So again, it's leavened with air. There's no chemical leavener in a genoise. And so the cake itself should rise evenly, and it should have a nice color. It should not be mounded. It should not crown. So it should rise with a flat top and should be baked evenly throughout. Once the cake is fully baked, the candidate can remove it from the oven, allow it to cool in the pan for 5 to 10 minutes, run a spatula or a knife around the edges to loosen the cake from the pan, and turn that out. Remove the parchment paper from the bottom, allow it to cool, and then they need to take, again, that piece out for you to taste. They will present that on a plate. The rest of the cake can go on a cake stand. Next are the cookies. These are pretty straightforward. The candidate's going to prepare 1 dozen chocolate chip cookies utilizing the drop method, and then the second cookie is going to be 1 dozen butter cookies utilizing a piped method. Scooped cookies and piped cookies. Okay, so drop method is using a portion control scoop, and the piped cookies, they should be piping those out of a pastry bag with some sort of tip that has been put in, whether it's a straight tip or a star tip. So the candidates are to produce 1 dozen cookies. They choose the size that they want. If there's a little bit extra, they should have a good explanation of what will be done with the leftover cookies. It is optimal when the candidate does not produce more than 18 cookies. Again, there's no size restriction, so if they want to make 1 dozen chocolate chip cookies, nobody's telling them they can't make an 8-ounce cookie. All right, so you're looking for approximately 1 dozen cookies. Typically, candidates will have a few more. I've never seen it where they have less. So, but again, 12 cookies, 1 dozen, is the requirement. You're looking for a balanced formula that is mixed properly. The bowl is scraped really well, again, so that mixture is completely incorporated. They're baked properly, resulting in a delicious, eye-appealing cookie that is then placed on a platter or plate that is suitable for a buffet. Candidates can choose to use white milk or dark chocolate, as well as any other additions if they choose in the chocolate chip cookie. Again, this is going to be a creamed cookie that is using a portion control scoop, and it's baked properly and it tastes good. The piped cookie does not require any additional flavor. However, the candidate can choose to add one if they so desire. The butter cookie that I typically see is something like a spritz type cookie or an almond paste based piped butter cookie. When they display it on the platter, it should be shingled properly and it should be eye appealing to the guest as if they were serving it on a buffet. The Bavarian cream, the candidate can present all of the Bavarian creams, 4 of them, on one platter. They do not require any sort of garnish or crunch component. This is not a plated dessert. They're just preparing 4 portions of a Bavarian cream. They're going to unmold it and present it. So you're looking for the proper texture, a nice flavor, and an excellent consistency. Again, no garnish, sauces, crunch, nothing like that is required. So basic method of preparation for a Bavarian cream. It's typically a creme anglaise that needs to be made on site. Then the anglaise has the addition of a flavor and some gelatin. It's lightened with some whipped cream. It's poured into a mold. It's allowed to set. It should be set in the refrigerator. They do actually have enough time that it can set properly in the refrigerator, and then it should be removed from the mold and served cold and not frozen. Oftentimes you see people making a Bavarian cream, they'll toss it into the freezer, they'll unmold it, and they'll serve it frozen. Bavarian cream should not be served frozen. It should be a mousse that the spoon or the fork goes through easily. It should have a nice texture to it. It should have a nice foam to it. But it should not be served frozen, and it should not be too rubbery from too much gelatin. Flavor profile should be recognizable, whether it's chocolate or a fruit. Make sure that when you read the menu that you understand what flavor you're looking for. When you taste it, it should taste like that. And when you look at it, it should have a nice eye appeal as far as color. Okay, so the candidate is to exhibit all of those items. As a reminder, candidates can bring all of their mise en place pre-scaled, pre-labeled, but nothing can be prepared. So, for example, the Bavarian cream, all of the ingredients can be scaled out, but they can't bring in the creme anglaise already made. They need to make the creme anglaise on site. Okay, so that is the guidelines for what the certified pastry culinarian should be preparing during the practical exam. So the practical exam guidelines for the certified working pastry chef. Again, each candidate will get 30 minutes to set up their workstation. For this exam level, the candidate has 4 hours to complete their criteria and present it to the ACE. Candidates are responsible to bring in all of their own ingredients. They can have everything pre-scaled and pre-measured, labeled, all laid out for them to successfully complete the exam. There should not be any pre-mixing except for a cake that can be pre-made and brought in ready to use for their decorated cake. Now, with that being said, it's just the cake. The cake should be brought in whole. It should not be cut or shaped in any way. It should be one cake that is going to be cut into layers. It shouldn't be multiple layers of cake that are trimmed and then stacked. So they can bring in the pre-baked cake. Anything else and everything else needs to be made on site with whole ingredients that are already pre-measured, pre-scaled, ready for them to use. Menus are to be typed. They should be clean and professional looking. They should have logical layout and be free of typographical errors. A certified working chef should be at the level of a sous chef in the industry. These people typically have quite a few years of experience and may or may not have gone through an apprenticeship program or certificate or degree program. So this is the certified working pastry chef. We're going to talk about their exact criteria in the next slide. All criteria on the Certified Working Pastry Chef exam is set to a definable standard with easy to understand requirements. So what is the candidate actually to prepare and present? Here we go. First of all, pat a choux. The candidate will prepare 3 variations of pastry, choux pastry products, but there is no filling required. The candidate will present 4 portions of each variation on a suitable platter. So the candidate will prepare the choux pastry. They will pipe out eclairs, swans, and peri breast. As the candidate is making their choux pastry, pay attention to the method of preparation. Watch the size of the piped items. They should be even. Therefore, they should be baking evenly, and they should be baked properly. The candidate, again, does not need to fill the choux pastry. They will present 3 whole items and then 1 that is cut to be filled and finished if they were to fill and finish them in the industry. So basically, the candidate is going to prepare the choux pastry, pipe it out, bake it properly. They're going to show you 3 finished or fully baked rather items, and then the 4th item, the 4th portion, is going to be cut as if it were to be filled and finished. But nothing, again, is filled. Nothing is actually finished and garnished. So when they're cutting the eclair, they trim off the top, they open it up, you see the inside. Not everybody cuts their eclairs. I would suggest to the candidate they have 3 that are uncut and 1 that is cut, so you can see the inside of the choux pastry itself to verify that it is baked properly. For the swan, again, you're going to have 3 bodies that are intact and 3 heads off to the side. The 4th head is going to be with a body that is trimmed with the wings that are cut as if it were to be filled and finished. The peri breast the same way, so you're going to have 3 peri breasts that are intact and 1 that is cut in half and opened up for you to see the inside. So again, choux pastry, 3 variations, eclair, swan, and peri breast. They need 4 portions of each. 3 are whole and 1 is cut so that you can see the inside. Next, we're going to talk about the strawberry fruit flan. The candidate will prepare a pâté sucré, and they will produce an 8-inch round fruit flan. So the dough is going to be prepared. It's going to be pinned out. It's going to be put into the tart pan. It's going to be fully baked. Once it's fully baked, pulled out, the fruit flan will be filled with straight pastry cream. All right, nothing going into that pastry cream except for flavoring like vanilla extract. It does not need to be lightened in any way. So part of this exam is to show that the candidate can make a pastry cream that can be used for a fruit flan that can be cut and served without being too soupy and ooze out of the flan, and it shouldn't be too stiff and rubbery because there's so much starch in it. So the pastry cream goes in. The fruit flan is topped with clean and prepared strawberries and strawberries only, and then it is finished with apricot glaze. The apricot glaze can be a pre-made item that's brought in, heated up, and used and applied to the fruit flan. Once it is finished, a portion of the fruit flan is cut out, served on a plate for the ace to taste and examine, and the rest of the flan itself is served on either a cake stand or a suitable platter. So again, the flan should be made with fresh, clean strawberries. The dough should be tender and baked correctly. It should not be too thick or too thin. The pastry cream should be thick enough to hold its shape, but not starchy and not too sweet. And again, it is not lightened. It is straight pastry cream. Next is the decorated cake. The cake, again, can be pre-baked and brought in, but it should not be shaped. It should be one cake that is cut into 3 layers and then filled, etc. So the cake is going to be 8 inches. The candidate can demonstrate their choice of skills through the application of the medium and the utilization of proper tools. The cake should be cut into thirds. So they're going to tort it twice to have 3 layers. So they have 3 layers of cake, 2 layers of filling, proper maceration, and it's decorated with a medium that uses at least 2 piping techniques. The cake should look even and clean. It should be smooth. The piping should be consistent and appropriate for an 8-inch cake. The cake should eat well with appropriate flavor combinations. When they macerate the cake, it should be a syrup that is not too sweet, and it should have a nice moistening, offer the cake nice moistening ability, but not overpower anything, and it should not make the cake soggy. The candidate can then take the finished cake, cut a serving out of it. One piece of cake is served. The rest of the cake is served on an appropriate cake stand or platter for the ACE. Lastly, for the certified working pastry chef is the chemical leavened product. So the chemical leavened product is to be a banana nut quick bread that is arranged for a buffet service, and there needs to be 12 portions. The banana nut bread should be free of tunnels. It should have a nice balance of banana and nuts, and the display should be, again, appropriate for a buffet. 12 portions could be shingled very nicely. It should be in the direction of the guest as if they were walking up to a buffet. It has been asked if you can prepare 12 muffins, banana nut muffins. That is acceptable. You'll need to cut into the muffin itself to make sure that the overall texture on the inside and the grain structure is correct, that it is free of tunnels. The tunnels are caused by overmixing. So again, for the certified working pastry chef, they're preparing 3 choux items. So they're going to make eclair, swan, and Perry breast. They're going to make 4 of each of those, and they're going to present 3 whole and 1 that is cut. The strawberry fruit flan that is going to be using fresh strawberries, pastry cream only for the filling, and it's finished with an apricot glaze. Single portion is cut out and served. The rest is presented accordingly. The decorated cake, an 8-inch cake, 3 layers of cake, macerated appropriately, filled and finished with an appropriate medium, and has a minimum of 2 piping techniques. Lastly, the chemical leavened product is the banana nut quick bread. Certified executive pastry chef candidates can now utilize a comprehensive candidate handbook with application forms, sample written exam questions, recommended reading material, practical exam guidelines, and much more. And this is all found on the ACF national website. At this level, the candidate should be very comfortable in a kitchen and in their workstation. They should be very clean and efficient as they're moving through this process. Again, all candidates have 30 minutes to set up. This includes a certified executive pastry chef. So 30 minutes to set up their workstation. And this exam is 4 hours long. All items must be completed and presented in this window of time. Candidates, again, are responsible to bring in all of their own ingredients. They can be pre-scaled, pre-measured. Everything can be labeled, laid out for a nice, easy flow. They may also bring in 2 prepared baked cakes to use for their decorated cakes. So they can bring in 2 cakes. Again, they should not be shaped. It should be whole cakes that are then torted during the exam. It should not be separate layers that are trimmed and then stacked. Everything else should be brought in to be made on site. So they can, again, bring in 2 prepared cakes along with their other pre-scaled mise en place. If the candidate chooses on a plated dessert to use an ice cream or a sorbet, they may also bring in their base. So they can bring the base pre-made, and then they can spin that for their plated dessert. But if they're not using it, then obviously they're not going to bring that. Candidates should be encouraged to keep all waste separated, labeled, and stored properly for the ACE to observe. So if they do trim their cake and they don't utilize it during the 4 hours of exam time, that should be wrapped and labeled and for use for later. And it should be labeled how they're going to use it, or certainly feel free to ask them how they plan to use it. If they store it, it should be stored back in the refrigerator. So make sure that as these candidates are going through, that if you see something sitting out on the table, maybe stop and ask them, hey, if you're going to use this in the future, how are you going to use it? Is this the best way that it would be stored in your normal kitchen circumstances? Typed menus should be clean and professional looking, a logical layout, and free of typographical errors. Again, this is certified executive pastry chef, so we're looking for a high level of competency here. And enjoy what you see. It's very interesting to see how each candidate goes through the exam. Okay, so let's talk about the nitty-gritty on the Certified Executive Pastry Chef exam. What does the candidate need to prepare, and what is it that you're looking for? So first of all, the cakes have been given more specific guidelines. One uses ganache, and the second one uses an Italian buttercream. Both cakes should be torted or sliced into 3 layers. Candidates can bring those cakes already baked with them, and then they show the skill of torting the cake with 2 cuts, leaving 3 layers of cake. When stacking both of these cakes, they should be evenly layered with their respective mediums and syruped if necessary. The syrup should not be too overpowering, but provide a nice balanced flavor and necessary moisture. Both cakes should have a well-balanced flavor profile overall. Example, the ganache cake is going to be rich by nature, so the candidate could use a thin layer of raspberry or apricot preserve to provide a little tartness, as well as add a complementary flavor. When the cakes are finished, one slice is to be cut out by the candidate and served by the candidate onto a plate, and the rest of the cake is served on an appropriate vessel. Usually it's going to be a cake stand or an appropriate platter that fits that cake. The ganache cake is to be finished with a poured ganache. Again, the ganache cake needs to be finished with poured ganache. It should be smooth and shiny and free of any legs. This cake is to be completely covered, and the sides of this cake should be left plain so you can observe the glazing skill of the candidate. There can be a small skirt on the very bottom edge to help cover the cardboard. The 12 rosettes are then piped on the top, and they're evenly spaced in proportion to the cake size. So again, the cake size here should be 8 inches. Each of these 2 cakes is torted into 3 layers. So it's cut twice, so you have 3 layers. So again, the ganache cake, and I have to reiterate this, it is poured ganache. It is not a whipped ganache and then applied with a palette knife. It's poured over a cake that's already been crumb-coated or masked with something else. Next is a celebration cake. The celebration cake should be appealing and have appropriate colors and garnishes to the theme of the cake. The theme should be recognizable at first glance. There should be 2 different piping techniques shown on the finished cake. Again, all piping techniques should be proportionate to the cake size. At this certification level, the writing on a cake should be fine and delicate, and the salutation is spelled correctly. Example, there could be a small rose spray on top with leaves, a small shell or pearl border, and congratulations written with chocolate on the top of the cake. Next, let's talk about the plated desserts. The candidate will demonstrate both a cold dessert and a hot or warm dessert, 4 portions of each menu item. Review the menu so you know if you're expecting a hot dessert or a warm dessert. If the menu states hot and you get a warm dessert, then you'll need to make notes on the score sheet in the Achieving Stated Menu section. This will be discussed further in the next 2 slides. The cold plated dessert should be a well-balanced plate with all the expected components. You have a cold main item with the appropriate sauces, garnishes, and accompaniments. The flavors, textures, and colors should complement and contrast each other and be well-balanced. Example, you want sweet and tart, not all sweet. Balanced color, something bright to offset tan or brown. Textures need to offset each other as well. A crunch can offset something soft. Remember, this is the Certified Executive Pastry Chef exam. The desserts should reflect this level. You should not be getting a main item with a sauce and some mint garnish. We're not talking restaurant chef level. We're talking Certified Executive Pastry Chef level. The hot or warm plated dessert should be the same expectation as the cold. For the plated desserts, keep in mind the overall presentation and use of china and or serving vessels. China on top of china is not to be expected. If the menu states something classical, then the presentation should reflect the classical item. Lastly is the yeast leaven rolls. The candidate will make up 1 dough. It should be developed properly, rested properly, and shaped according to the menu. The candidate will provide 3 different shapes, 8 portions of each, using 1 batch of dough. The rolls should be even and look the same and presented nicely when finished, like in a basket or another appropriate buffet-style presentation. Rolls can be garnished with appropriate toppings like sesame or poppy seeds, and the 3 different shapes should not consist of a single knot, a double knot, and a round roll. Again, we're at certified executive pastry chef level. You should be expecting something a little bit more complex. They could have a round, a knotted, a braid, a Parker House roll. These are nice examples of different shapes, but hopefully the candidate does not just provide you the round, the single knot, and the double knot, because the knot is a knot. Okay, so hopefully you get something a little bit higher. So that's the certified executive pastry chef level criteria. So now we have the new practical exam score sheet for the certified executive pastry chef. It is very similar to the CEC sheet that we've been using for the last year, so this should look pretty familiar as far as the layout and how it's used. If you've not used it, we're going to explain to you how to use it. So when you go onto the website, the ACF National website, you can download this new score sheet in an Excel format that's already set up for you. So all you do is plug your numbers in. The sheet itself does all the math for you, gives you the weighted average, and tells you whether the candidate passed or not based on the scores that were written down by each evaluator. So we're going to go through each of the pages. This is the first page. You can see on the left side it says Domain 1 is Safety and Sanitation. It's either acceptable or not acceptable. Make sure, again, to write down really good comments and notes so that you have a good critique at the end, and you can write down good notes to give the candidate the feedback form at the end of the critique. So the second domain is organizational skills, and that's 20% of the overall weighted value for the score, and it's broken out into the mise en place, assessing formulations and recipes, management of the ingredients and the storage methods, and selecting ingredients and equipment. So this overall organizational skill is better laid out in the wording of what to look for, what to expect, and how to evaluate that candidate. The third domain is the craftsmanship, which of course is how they actually execute and finish each of their items. This is going to be 40% of the score, and it's broken out into proper execution of mixing, baking, etc., handling of the ingredients, the use of the production guidelines, and overall development and creation of decorative elements. So those are the first 3, and that is mainly on the left side. On the top right-hand corner, you'll see a gray box, and it says the rating scale. So as an evaluator, you need to rate each candidate for each criteria with a score anywhere from 1 to 10. So when we look at the rating scale box, 1 to 2.5 is unacceptable, 2.6 to 5 has major deficiencies, 5.1 to 7.4 is minor deficiencies, and then 7.5 to 10 is acceptable. As we read down the right side, it says you can provide comments, and they are required if you provide a score of 7.4 or less. So if the candidate is preparing creme anglaise and they curdle the creme anglaise, well, that's a major deficiency. So you're going to give them a score between 2.6 and 5. Or of course, you could certainly say it's completely unacceptable and give them a 1. But make sure anything that you are giving a score of 7.4 or less, you need to provide a comment and put it in the appropriate line, in the appropriate area for the administrator of all of the certification for that day, so that they can type those comments in, and they have to save that documentation for the ACF. So this new score sheet is awesome. It takes a couple extra minutes. It's nice to have maybe 2 people working on the computer to input all of the scores from each of the evaluators. So evaluator 1 is going to be evaluator 1 throughout the entire day so that there's no confusion on who evaluator 1 is, and their scores will be input into that correct column. Evaluator 2, etc. So again, a reminder, the rating scale is from 1 to 10. As you look at the left side, it says Domain 2 Organizational Skills 20%. That next column says WV. And then below WV, there's numbers. And in Domain 2, they all happen to be a 5. You don't need to worry about that so much. It's the weighted value of that specific domain. But again, regardless of weighted value, you are rating the candidate from 1 to 10. So make sure anytime that you're putting a score in, it's 1 to 10, regardless of the weighted value. So again, this is the new sheet. This is available online, the ACF national website. So this is for the Certified Executive Pastry Chef, and this is page 1, covering the safety and sanitation, organizational skills, and craftsmanship. The second page of the score sheet packet in the Excel spreadsheet format for the Certified Executive Pastry Chef goes into Domain 4, which is the actual finished product that the candidate is providing. So there's 3 of them on this page, and then we're still going to go over yet another page. So cake number 1 is the chocolate ganache cake. Again, each evaluator, number 1, 2, and 3, puts their numbers in the appropriate column. And the rating scale is there in the top right-hand corner in the gray box to remind you it's from 1 to 10, and anything 7.4 or less must have comments. Of course, if you give them an 8, you can still put a comment. It's nice to have the positive comments. Those are handy to write on the final critique sheet that you give to the candidate at the end of your verbal critique. So looking at chocolate ganache cake, it says achieving stated menu. And one of the things that I like to really emphasize to folks is to review the menu. Does the menu make sense? How is it written? Does it look nice? Are there any typos? But at the end, have you actually received what it is that they said they were selling you on that menu? So achieving the stated menu is important. You know, did they write down the chocolate ganache cake is going to be white chocolate? And if not, and you get a white chocolate ganache cake, then you might be kind of surprised. So consider what it is that they wrote on that menu and what you actually get at the very end. How is the assembly and the enrobing? Remember, the chocolate ganache cake is a poured ganache. It should be completely covered with a very small skirting at the bottom. The decorating method and the garnishing elements, do they, size-wise, are they appropriate for the size of the cake, which should be an 8-inch cake? Does it look good? Is everything even? Is everything spaced out evenly, etc.? Balance, flavor, texture, color, and the presentation technique. So you can see it's nicely broken out, gives you very clear guidelines on what it is to look for and what your expectation should be. The celebration themed cake is the same. It's just broken out so that you can critique and score each cake individually. So it's the same criteria: achieving the stated menu, assembly technique, etc. And again, it's 1 to 10. Making good notes is awesome. So make sure when you're looking at these cakes that they do look nice, that they're torted evenly, the layers are nice and even, the cake should be flat. The celebration themed cake should have nice smooth buttercream. It's Italian buttercream. It should be smooth. It should not have texture to it. If they choose to do a combed side, that's acceptable. It should be perfectly combed. It should be nice and even. The top should be even and flat. And then have the appropriate decoration and piping technique on the top. The last one here is the yeast leaven rolls. Again, going into, what did they tell you they're going to give you on the menu, and does it actually match? How is the overall assembly of the dough and the actual production, controlling the temperatures from start to finish, etc., etc. So again, really want to emphasize, this score sheet may seem a little overwhelming, but at the end of the day, it makes a lot of sense. It's fairly easy to use. It can be just a little time consuming the first couple times you do use it. But like I said, if you have 2 people, excuse me, to enter the numbers, it makes it go pretty quick. So evaluators, stay in your column. Remember, it's 1 to 10, and make really good comments. Keep good notes. The last page for the Certified Executive Pastry Chef score sheet, again, this is in that Excel format, continuing from page 2 with domain number 4, which is the finished product skill. Now you're going to be evaluating the hot or warm plated dessert and the cold plated dessert. Again, I'd like to emphasize that achieving the stated menu is very important, because if they say they're serving you something warm and you get it cold, then that's obviously not achieving the stated menu. If they are serving you a hot dessert and it says hot, then you expect something hot. So it might seem trivial, but it is important that at this level, the candidate is selling you a product that you get what they're selling you. So make sure to read through that menu and mark it up accordingly. On this sheet, it does not remind you what the rating scale is. It's 1 to 10. Each evaluator has their own column. And any score 7.4 or less is required to have a comment with it. So again, taking really good notes throughout the day, because this is 4 hours, is really good for not only the ACE, but for the candidate, because the ACE can read through their notes, go back and have a really good critique, make good notes on that final sheet that you give to the candidate at the end of the critique. Okay, so their overall evaluation. So hot or warm plated dessert, go ahead and read through there, decorating methods, garnishing elements, etc., balance of flavor, texture, color, and the presentation technique. And you can score that accordingly, again, 1 to 10. Same thing for the cold plated dessert. And then once you have evaluated each component from that candidate, pass that off. The computer person puts all of the numbers in, and at the end of the sheet, it will tell you, if you look down towards the bottom, it says total score, and it gives you the pound DIV. Well, that's because they have to input all the information first, but that's where the score is going to come up. It's going to say, okay, the score is 98. Excellent. You got a candidate passing with flying colors. That's beautiful, fabulous. Give them a great critique, congratulate them, and they can carry on. Any score 74, anything up to 74.9 is not passing. So remember that these scores, it's pass or fail. A 75 or above is a passing score. Anything below a 75 is not passing. If they get a 74, and that's the numbers that come up after all of the evaluators have put in all of their numbers in their notes, and it comes up a 74, the candidate's just not quite ready to be a CEPC. So encourage them with an excellent critique on how to improve their skills and ability, and the ability to display them, to come back and retake the exam. So this is just an overview of the new score sheet. Again, it's available. It's user-friendly. It gives you a good breakdown of what you're looking for. And again, the score is from 1 to 10. Each evaluator has their column. Remember to sign off on each of your forms. Moving on to a little bit of the savory side now, we're going to talk about the CSC, the Certified Sous Chef exam, and talk about the changes to the score sheet. There's been some updates, and I think they're excellent updates. I think they're very helpful. I think I've heard the same thing from a lot of different people, so I'm speaking on behalf of your colleagues that some of these changes are making our lives as ACE much easier. So taking a look at this sheet here, it gives you the exam guidelines. It's the overview of what is expected of this candidate. And again, this CSC level, the candidate has 30 minutes to set up, and they will have 2 hours to complete the criteria. The beautiful thing about this slide is the checkbox. So the bottom half of this slide gives you a checkbox for each of the items that is required to be produced by the candidate for the CSC level. So you can take a look, and this was actually, it kind of came off of the CEC exam score sheet. A lot of people said, hey, this is great. We've got the checkbox. We can check it off as the candidate is pulling out those items and making them. So it has been implemented into the CSC. So your feedback is very valuable. People do listen to what you have to say. So that's why the CSC score sheet is now different. So you can take a look. It's got the half recipe of the Matignon, so you can just check that off, the Globe artichoke, etc. So this is a new updated version of the CSC score sheet. Very handy. Again, lots of valuable resources on the ACF website for the certification because it is ever changing. So have a look. Excellent new score sheet. So now we're looking at the new CSC score sheet. Again, it's in the Excel format that everybody should be using. And I'm just going to point out it's very similar to the CEPC that we just discussed, and it is hand in hand with the CEC score sheet that we've been using since the beginning of 2012. So just going to point these out quickly because it's very similar, like I said, to the CEPC that we just did. So the candidate's name goes in the name box, or name slot rather. And then you have Domain 1, Safety and Sanitation. It's either acceptable or not. And if it's not, you have really good notes as to why it's not. Domain 2 is the organizational skills. Again, this is the mise en place and the workflow of the candidate, the use of their time, the use of their space. How did they store their food from beginning to end, including anything that's going to be utilized later? Did they store it properly? Use of ingredients and menu development. Again, on the right-hand side in that gray box, the rating scale, 1 to 10, anything 7.4 or lower, please put your comments in the comment area. Domain number 3 is the craftsmanship skills, and that's going to be that 40%. Again, the weighted value, the same information is here, but please remember you are scoring from 1 to 10 regardless of what the weighted value is. So you can just pretend like it's not even there if that helps you out. So put your scores, if you're the evaluator 1, then always keep your scores in evaluator 1 column. So back to domain 3, craftsmanship and skills, 40%. Use of equipment, weighing and measuring. How are their knife skills? How is their butchery? How did they prepare their sauces? Did they form a nice emulsification? What were their fundamental cooking skills and ability? How did they perform? So very good information, broken out very well. This is very helpful for some of the sweet chefs that are out there that might not be in a savory kitchen a lot. This really breaks it out for those sweet pastry chefs that, again, aren't in the hot kitchen all the time. Just like the new pastry score sheets are excellent for the savory chef that doesn't come in the shop very often. Okay, so we got to help each other out, and these new score sheets are awesome. And then at the very bottom, you can't quite see it very well, but there's your little check boxes. So it says exam time 2 hours. It gives you a spot to put the setup time, the start time, the close of the window. Put your evaluator name in on the line there. And then there's your little check box for each of the items that needs to be prepared by this candidate. So this is the first page for the CSC. Second page for the CSC. Again, reminder, I'm going to beat a dead horse here. 1 to 10. Your evaluator scores are going to be from 1 to 10 in your appropriate column for each and every item, regardless of what the weighted value is. Domain number 4 is the finished product skill. Okay, so we have 2 pages. We're going to cover this page, and then we're going to go to the second page. I'm going to point out some very important things here. First and foremost, you've got the Matignon, maintaining food integrity, flavor profile, achieving desired texture, color, and determining doneness. Pretty straightforward on the expectation. We're going to talk a little bit more about Matignon in the Q&A slide that's in a couple more slides. So make sure, again, 1 to 10, put in your appropriate score. 7.4 or less, please make comments. The artichoke, same thing, maintaining food integrity, etc. Next, I want to point this out, very important. You have the whole flat fish and the strip steak. This is the area that you're going to be making notes and comments on which protein they are not using for the main course. So if they serve their fish as the main course, then you're going to check strip steak and make all of the appropriate comments in this area for the strip steak. If they choose to serve the strip steak as the main course, then you're going to check whole flat fish and make all the appropriate comments, compliments, and scores in this category here. So again, depending on what they use for the main course, which protein is used, then for the main course, you're going to check the opposite in this box. Lastly, at the bottom is the salad course, emulsification and use of dressing. Again, you can read through there, maintaining food integrity, etc. Make your notes, make your comments, and then put your score down. But most important thing on this page here, whichever protein they are not using on the main course is where you're evaluating it here. So if they're serving fish for the main course, please check strip steak and make the appropriate notes and comments. Okay, so the final page for the CSC in the new Excel spreadsheet score sheet that's so awesome is going to be the finished product skill. So now we have the rice pilaf, the other protein that is going to be used for the main course, and then evaluating the main course itself. So rice pilaf, maintaining food integrity, etc. Again, 1 to 10, fill in your appropriate column, make your comments 7.4 or less, and then whichever protein they're using for the main course, make a check mark of which one it is. If they're serving the fish, please check the fish here, and then evaluate and score it accordingly. Lastly then is the main course. It should achieve the menu. What did they state on the menu that they were preparing for you? Does it match what they said that they were selling you? And the rest of the information, just like the plated desserts we talked about. How is the presentation technique? Did they choose the right vessel? How about garnishes? Are they appropriate? Do they have good accompaniments, etc.? So just read through there. And the biggest thing here is marking which protein is used where, making good comments on any and all scores. I mean, feel free to put good comments as well as how to improve comments on here. And anything 7.4 or less needs to have a comment on how to improve so that the candidate can pass the exam maybe the next time they take it if they are not successful this time. Again, the bottom of the sheet, please sign your signature, put your ACF number, etc. And once the inputter of all of the numbers is done, the spreadsheet does all the math for you and it pops out the number of whether or not the candidate passed based on the numbers that were given to them by each evaluator. So 75 or higher is a passing score. They either pass or they don't pass. So, take a look at all of your notes and your numbers before you hand it to the person inputting the numbers, and make sure you're comfortable with how you're feeling you scored that candidate. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, please make really good notes. Okay, so that's it for score sheets, and that was the CSC. Okay, so what's next? Well, Certified Master Pastry Chef exam is the talk of the town. So the Certified Master Pastry Chef exam, the manual itself is available online. It has been updated and explains clearly what the expectations are for anyone choosing to take this exam. The exam itself has been reworked, and the guidelines have been refreshed and adjusted to meet the practicalities of today's culinary world. Each candidate is evaluated on the skill and technique of each item that's stated in the manual, and this will provide a full assessment of the candidate's skill just like every other exam and exam level. Currently, we have 11 certified master pastry chefs in the U.S., and so there's obviously a need to sustain this exam and the certification level so that we can continue to have certified master pastry chefs for the next generation. With that said, we need a group of candidates to take this exam in 2013. Well, look, it's January. I'm recording this in January. It is 2013, and we need 6 candidates that are going to take the exam in August. With that said, the goal of the ACF is to revive this exam and to hold it every odd year. So 2013 is the year for the CPC to be held, and then hold the CMC, the Certified Master Chef exam, every even year. So the next CMC exam would then be in 2014, 2015 would be the Master Pastry Chef, etc. A Certified Master Pastry Chef assessment has been confirmed for the 29th through the 31st of March of 2013 at Sullivan University in Louisville, Kentucky. Chef Derek Spenlove is hosting the event, and Certified Master Pastry Chef Gunther Hyland will be the main facilitator for the assessment. Costs and more details will be posted and emailed to interested candidates very soon. All questions and interests should be directed to Sandy Friend at the National ACF office at this point. The exam itself, the CPC exam, is scheduled to be held from the 16th to the 23rd of August of 2013 at Johnson & Wales University, Charlotte, North Carolina campus. So, big news, folks. We want people to take the exam. So if you're at all interested, please contact Sandy Friend down at the National Headquarters office. Let her know that you are interested. Fill out your paperwork, which is all online. It says CPC application. I'm looking at the middle of this slide. It says the application process to apply for this. Here's the information. Here's the guidelines and qualifications. Submit your letter of intent with your application and $300. And talk to Sandy, and she will be providing all of the other information that you may need. And also, you can see the CPC examination manual is available to anybody and everybody. It is online, it is updated, it's very clear as to what the expectation is. So if you're interested, if you know anyone else that is interested, please pass the word around. Every odd year, we're going to be running the CPC exam, starting this year, 2013. Yay! So that's the latest on what's next. So we have a couple more questions and answers that have come up in the webinars from the last quarter of 2012, and we just wanted to share some of those with you, hopefully to provide some clarification in case you're wondering the same questions. So for the Certified Executive Pastry Chef, a couple questions on the cake that can be brought in. First question is, can it be commercially made? There's nothing that says that it has to be from scratch, but the cake should taste good. It should look good. The finishing of the cake is really very important. You could certainly ask the candidate if they made it from scratch or if they made a Duncan Hines out of the box cake, and ask them, why would they choose to make something out of a box? And, you can't, they don't lose points, they don't gain points, but, you could certainly ask them the question and suggest to them that, it would be more appropriate, especially at the CEPC level, to be making a cake from scratch. Another question regarding that cake is, what size should it be for the CEPC? Well, it does not specify what size, being that the other CWPC says an 8-inch cake. We're leaning more towards the 8-inch cake, but please look for updates on the cake size for the CEPC. It really should be an 8-inch cake, and we are going to be changing that so that it is very specific, and there is no longer that question as to what size cake for the Certified Executive Pastry Chef level. Other questions that have come up. Can the artichoke for the CSC exam be served hot or cold? And yes, the artichoke can be served hot or cold. Look at the menu and see how they describe it on the menu to determine what it was temperature-wise that you were to be looking for. Next question, it says there seems to be a discrepancy on Matignon and knife cuts. Is it diced for the veggies or is it paisan for the ham, etc.? So clarification for the Matignon is refer to Escoffier number 321, and it gives you the ingredients, amounts, and methodology. Paisan is the cut, but if they use a dice, you can still evaluate what is important, which is the knife skills and the consistency. Also, the order of the cooking and the temperature controls, as it calls for no color and for the finished products to be glazed. Overall, evaluators should be looking for cutting techniques consistent with every cut, cooked in butter, no color. Use a pork product, cut the same way as the vegetables, including thyme, bay leaf, salt, and pepper. So the heat control is very important. It should be simmered in one layer. Review the thickness of the cut. Did they use wine or stock or broth? Does it boil? Is it, what kind of liquid do they have left over? Because it shouldn't be necessarily a liquid. It should be, there should be no liquid. There should be no residual juice. It should provide this nice glaze to the vegetables and that pork product. Earlier we talked about the test anxiety. Another question was for the certified executive pastry chef back to the ganache coating for the ganache cake. And the answer to the question, well, actually the question is, the candidate expressed that his or her presentation was contemporary. That's why it had legs coming down the side and only the top was completely covered. This is not acceptable. The cake needs to be completely glazed with a fluid ganache, and it should be free of, air bubbles. It should have a nice shine. It should be nice and smooth and even. So no free forming. It's completely glazed. What constitutes failure for sanitation for either savory or sweet? Well, savory seems to be more upfront, more easily determined. If you break down your chicken, you move your chicken off your board and you start cutting your vegetables that are for your salad, that's an obvious failure. For the pastry side, it's a little bit more difficult to fail for sanitation reasons, but here's a hypothetical situation that you could consider. So the candidate brings their eggs in the shell. They have not cracked their eggs yet. They bring them in the shell. They crack the eggs on the bench to finish, their mise en place for their product. When they're cracking their eggs, they're dripping egg whites all over the place, and they never wipe down their table, and they move right into preparing fruit for their plated dessert. Okay, that's a problem. That's a contamination issue. You can stop the candidate and tell them to sanitize their table, or you can just mark it down, let them finish, and then fail them at the end. That's up to you. I would probably err on the side of stopping the chef, explaining to them that I see a problem and that they have the opportunity to fix it. If they choose not to fix it, I think we know where we're going with that, and that's where the good comments come in, the good critique on how to properly sanitize your table, etc. Another purpose for failure, sanitation failure for a pastry candidate would be that their products don't smell good. So they're bringing in dairy or egg products that have gone bad. That's obviously a problem. They can't serve those foods. So consider how the pastry candidate handles their egg products, especially their dairy products. If they make a sauce like an anglaise that needs to be used for a plated dessert, but they never refrigerate it, that could be a contamination issue depending on how long it sat on the bench. So be very cognizant, pay attention to what people are doing, pay attention to how long items are sitting out on the table, and feel free to ask the candidate questions. Hey, how soon are you going to use this? Is this how you always do it in your kitchen? What's your thought process behind leaving this out on the table for 3 hours? Ask them some questions without being too intimidating and stern that you're yelling at them. But, hey chef, I saw that you made this creme anglaise 2 hours ago. It's still sitting out. It's no longer in an ice bath. It's just sitting in water. Is that how you would store it in your restaurant or in your bake shop? And see how they react and make notes accordingly. Another great question was a candidate for Certified Executive Chef, CEC. Can they bring in clarified butter? Yes, the answer is yes, they can bring in clarified butter for whatever purpose they're using it for. That's not a problem. Another question for the CEC is, can they bring in tomato paste? Of course they can bring in tomato paste, not a problem. Now if they bring in a number 10 can of tomato paste and they use a tablespoon, that's a problem. Okay, but they can bring in the tomato paste. One last question for the strawberry flan for the certified working pastry chef. Can they bring that glaze pre-made, a commercial item, and heat it up and use it? The answer is yes. So if they would like to go to Albert Ooster or Swiss Chalet and get the apricot glaze in a bucket, yes, they need to bring in about what they need to use. They heat it up. They're going to dilute it with some water. But yes, they can bring a commercial made apricot glaze. They don't have to make it on site. So that's going to wrap up the questions and answers. If you have more questions, please feel free to contact myself or any other ACE trainer, or of course Elena down at the national office, and she will distribute the questions according to who can best answer them, and then we will get back to you. So thank you. Thank you for your participation in today's ACE refresher. To verify your participation, please complete the short survey that will be emailed to you shortly. Simply click on the link and complete the questions. Just to verify, this survey will confirm your participation, which will then in turn provide you the 1.5 hours of CEHs as promised at the beginning, and it fulfills your 2012 ACE refresher requirement. Remember, as an ACE, we agree to do a refresher each year and to evaluate at least one exam each year. As I mentioned earlier, I just want to re-emphasize the fact that certification is living, it's moving, it's ever-changing. So always refer back to the website, call the office if you have any questions on things that may have changed. If you haven't looked at a manual in 6 months, please review the manual before you proctor your next exam so that you are up to date. You make sure you have all the right information, the right score sheets, etc. I'd like to thank myself for recording this for you. I'd like to thank you for putting up with my voice for however long it took you to get through this. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is here. Thank you very much again for your continued support of the ACF and of certification and bettering ourselves and our next generation of culinarians. Thank you. Take care.